I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Board of Waterworks Trustees, February 25th, 2020, 3:30 p.m. So everyone has the decision agenda before them. Before we start, I'd like to welcome our newest board member. So Joel, you want to take a minute and
Sure.
tell us about yourself?
I'm Joel Ashbrenner. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to serve on the board and eager to continue the great work you all have been doing. Most of you have met me or know me. A little background on me. I've got a journalism background, spent some years as a newspaper reporter. More recently, I've been a law student and will finish law school in May and start with a local firm, Davis Brown, this coming year. And have lived in Des Moines about 8 years, up in Ward 1 in Beaverdale Wayland Park. And so just excited to be involved.
Well, welcome. All right, so the first item on the agenda, the consent agenda, including the minutes, financial statements, list of payments for January 2020. The CEO approved expenditures in excess of $20,000 and our next meeting date. Can I have a motion on that?
So moved.
Second. Ted, you have anything that you'd like to point out?
Nothing to pull out, Diane, but I will mention that our pilot payment to the city is within the list of payments this month.
Any questions?
I was going to say something smart.
Good move.
I usually say something about the pilot payment.
Yeah.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The second item is the public comment hearing, or period. Do we have anyone who would like to speak? Hearing nothing, I'll close that, and we'll move on to our action items. The first one being the appeal of the backflow decision for 822 35th Street. Let me take a second to find it. I've not been keeping up here. Here we go. Ted, do you want to take us?
I do. I'm going to hand off pretty quickly, but we do have an appeal of a backflow decision that has come before the board today. We're going to first ask Jenny to kind of walk us through exactly where we are, and then we will offer the opportunity to follow up with comments from the customer. But Jenny, give us an overview of what's going on here, please.
Okay, well, we're here to talk about Patrick Hagee's property at 822 35th Street. This is a multi-tenant commercial property. It's divided into 3 units. And it's something that came on our radar back in November. So back in November, we started our standard procedure. We sent a water use inventory to Mr. Hagee, which he filled out and returned to us. And that talks about what type of business is in this commercial building, what things are connected to the public water supply, kind of our standard list of items. And that triggered a site visit by our staff with Mr. Hagee to his property to look around and see what was going on at that facility. Because it is a multi-tenant property, it does require backflow per our rules, and so he was sent an install notice back in November to install a backflow assembly at that property. This is, like I said, standard procedure for us. I went back and looked, and over the course of the last 2 years, we've notified 600 properties that they need to install backflow. 277 of those are multi-tenant properties that currently have backflow, and we're working with an additional 27 multi-tenant properties to install backflow. And Mr. Hagee's property is one of those 27. So let's talk just a minute about why multi-tenant properties require backflow. So a property that is a multi-tenant, think of a strip mall, where there's one water service coming into that facility and it serves multiple businesses at the same time. We know who the owner of the property is, who that service line belongs to, and who pays that water bill every month, but we don't necessarily know who the tenants are. And the tenants can come and go without us knowing. So the owner can move people in and out of the different units, and we would not know who they are, what they're doing, if they're a dentist office or a nail supply or an insurance agent or what. And so our standard practice is to have multi-tenant properties have backflow, because then we're protected against anybody moving in and putting in a high hazard fixture. So that's kind of been our procedure. Mr. Hagee came to the appeals committee on January 24th. The appeals committee consists of Amy Kaler from customer service, Mike McKernan from engineering, and myself. And we heard Mr. Hagee's concerns. One of the things he was concerned about is in our rules and regs. It's section 502.2.2, and it talks about new construction or remodeled commercial property requiring backflow. And that is true, all new commercial property does require backflow. And he felt that that excluded him from needing backflow of this property because he was not new or remodeled. But the language actually in the paragraph below it is why he was required to have it. So in paragraph 506.2.3, it talks about backflow is required where there's an actual or potential cross connection. And so that's the language that qualifies his property into backflow. Again, that potential is because there's more than one unit and we don't know who's coming and going in those facilities. So what we did is we offered Mr. Hagee an extension, and we said he could have until January 31st of 2021 to install backflow. He currently does not have any tenants that are high hazard risks to the public water supply, and that would give him more time to install. With the caveat, if somebody moved in that was high hazard, that he'd have to move it out 30 days from that time. And we also offered to look at our rules and regs this year and see if we can clarify that language a little bit, that you don't need to meet every paragraph, just one, in order to require backflow. Question on any of that?
I don't have any questions, but this is for Mr. Hagee, is that how you say it?
Yes, Hagee.
And for Joel's benefit, we spent this year considerable time looking at our backflow requirements. Had a special meeting where we walked through them and spent hours on it. So I just, for both of you, want you to know that this is something that we have spent a lot of time on and trying to understand both the requirements and the impact on people, so.
Diane, just to build off that, just to make sure we all have a common understanding, and I guess now that we have another attorney, Graham, I'm getting a little nervous.
We're outnumbered, but we're strong.
But just to kind of have a baseline understanding, what I found when we were going through that presentation by our legal counsel was this is something that the Iowa Code actually has put on the city of Des Moines, and we then are the individual, the group that has to fulfill this and ensure compliance within the code. Is that a good understanding? So it's not really a rule or regulation that we can change, but I think for some individuals that came before the board before, we said it would take a change to the Iowa Code, a legal change. Counselor, would that be a correct assessment?
Yes, and the Des Moines city ordinances both, which
And-
incorporate the plumbing codes.
So,
Well, I'd like to give
Yeah,
Mr. Hagee the opportunity
Yes,
to
me
share
too.
his
Me too.
perspectives before we discuss.
Okay. Yes, I did fill out the inventory, and some people came down and looked it all over and agreed. The building's grandfathered into a residential area. The house across the street's residential behind me, everything. And it's subject to be on the National Register of Historic Places. And so nothing's been changed in 110 years. It's got 3 toilets and 3 sinks. And the zoning commission, I'm going to show you a picture, quick picture. The zoning commission came by after we put a few Mustang signs on the door. I have a shop down there, and I live there, and the other 2 shops are rented out. And I'm only allowed to rent to gift shops and maybe an art gallery. It's light commercial. And just putting that sign on the door, the zoning commission came up, thought I had a repair shop there. And so I had to explain to them, go downtown, several meetings, that it wasn't. You know, we had some old Mustangs. My son and I had 3 Mustangs, and you know, they'd see them in there, and so I had to show them plates, you know, and everything. These were my vehicles. And there's storefront property. There's those 2 shops I rent out, and so you couldn't drive by the place without seeing, you know, what's in there. And there's no really, if you put a backflow device in there, it's really not going to do anything because there's no grass to put an irrigation system in. There's no everything on this inventory was checked no, and the water storage tanks, you know, all these things aren't zoned that would use one of these things. I couldn't rent them to them. And they say that it's no way for them to monitor. I guess the only decision was the reason for not allowing it or to have it put in is because Des Moines Waterworks, okay, when it remains in my name, there's no opportunity for Des Moines Waterworks to inventory water usage with changes in individual tenants. Well, for one thing, well, the water usage would be the same. If it wasn't, I'd get in trouble. And I'm the one screening the tenants, and I know exactly what they have in each shop. And there's, they'd have to get, you know, there's really feasible nothing that could go on there that would use, you know, chemical additives and all this. And with the chance of getting on the Register of Historic Places, and it's supposed to remain as much as it can. It's been rewired. I rewired the whole place. I'm a licensed electrician. But to do this would open up the, that I have to have the whole premises brought up to code. Now that is going to be cost prohibitive. I just got through fixing the roof of it all last summer. And it would never be, and you'd never use this thing with all the guards up. You know, you've got people driving by. It's right on the front of a busy street, and fairly busy. It's in a residential neighborhood. It's 35th Street. And I think it's, and once they do that, they're talking about different meters, and it would just, and I'm not sure if the grandfather clause would help me out on that or not, but it was put into effect so that people weren't, like, I'd have to put sprinklers in, and God knows what, if I had to keep up with the code, you know, with the other codes, and this would certainly be the most expensive thing against it. And, you know, it's got some galvanized pipes and copper in there, but it all works fine. And like I said, it was inspected, nothing's hooked to it. And I think you can inventory water usage through me, because I'm the one that, my name's on the water bill, and why it has to, you know, why they, if they need somebody, if they need every year for me to go down and tell them exactly who's in there, or fine, you know, put a $5,000 fine if somebody violates it, I don't care. But it's policed so well, you know, and it's been that way for 110 years. It just seems an awful lot of trouble for something that never would be used. You know, there's more plumbing in the house across the street than there is in that place, you know. And I don't feel that the cost of all that, you know, it'd be in the thousands, you know, maybe more. You know, once they, you know, trace every the water lines going up through the floor and everything, you know, like I say, I'm not sure copper or galvanized is even legal anymore, but I have a plumber friend say, no, it'd cost you a bundle. And with that said, that's about all I have to say. But, you know, if we could have inspections, anytime they want, they could have a key to the basements where the water comes in, you know, it was okay with me. But I'm sure somebody drives home, looks right at it every day, somebody, you know, that inspects. So I still had to put that, that's about all I have to say.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Just clarification from my part, so you're saying that the installation of a backflow would potentially trigger, upgrade of all?
Yes,
The
it
codes?
would be deemed a new water service. And in here, since I don't have any water service, I didn't think I needed it. But they're gonna, you know, make me have a new water service by putting that in. And that brings all that up to code. I've got, right now, there's an antique shop and then a veterans, center. And for veterans, that raises money and stuff for the veterans. But, and he just, you know, that has nothing to do with water, I guess. So, and it's been that way for, so I bought it in '78, and it was that way when I got it, so. That's about it.
I have a question too. You talked about it being zoned like commercial?
It's zoned commercial, but it's grandfathered in so that the shops that were there, which was a gift shop and maybe an office, I can't remember it was. But that way they can keep working as that, and you know, I can't rent it out for an apartment, but I can rent it to commercial.
So,
But it is in a very residential neighborhood.
yeah, I live not far from there.
Oh,
Drive by it on my way to the grocery store.
I see, yeah, that's, I mean,
But my question is there anything that would prohibit you from renting to something like a nail salon or?
well, common sense, I wouldn't, I'd make sure it was zoned for that, and I would make sure that, I wouldn't rent to those people. It's always, one shop helps the other, you know, in a way. And it's always been that way. There was a Pear Tree Antiques, my mom actually moved down there. I had bought the building, and she told me that she wanted an antique shop, so we started an antique shop. My sister had an antique shop down there, and there were part of his quilts, we sold the best quilts in the state. And that's mainly that's the only thing that's ever been in there.
Yeah, but I mean, there isn't anything in the zoning that would preclude that. I use nail salon because I think that's the easiest to understand.
I don't think I could rent it to that.
Yeah,
And I wouldn't without checking the, you know, the laws.
Would, you said you're applying for the National Historic Registry.
Yeah, it's an ongoing thing, but yes.
Would, if you put in a new water service, would that impact that at all, or is that just?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm just saying how I try
Sure.
to keep it original.
I see, okay,
And, but water's good, you know,
sure.
And the cost prohibitive, it would be so great, you know, you know, coming off this roof thing, you know, trying to keep the rent down. It's about a third of what Ingersoll charges for a gift shop, so, you know, it's pretty easy to rent. It would seem like an awful lot of trouble, you know, and that still doesn't prevent me from renting it out to somebody that shouldn't be there. It's, you know, if he violates that, you know, I guess that'd be my responsibility either way, you know, if he has his own, if we have a, you know, his own water meter, or if I do. And that would be an awful lot of expense, putting 3 water meters in those little shops, you know. And there's, the one is always mine, and the other 2, it's the only 2 I rent out right on the street. But
I'd like a little more technical explanation, maybe it could come from our counselor. So I've heard the terms grandfathered in and residential district. I don't remember any of those terms coming up in the presentation that we had.
I don't think,
Could-
I'm
Could
sorry.
we have, I mean, I'm interested, even if it's like R4 or R180, does that even make a difference with our backflow? I don't remember any of that.
It does not.
Okay,
It's exempt from, like,
No.
they haven't come in and made me put in fire doors or, sprinkler system or anything because it was built, in 1910 and those laws weren't in effect. But, that's not what I'm basing it on, I'm just saying.
Under the backflow provisions of the Des Moines City Ordinance, it divides the requirements into two categories. The first is new construction, which has a set of requirements. The other is the universe of existing buildings. And for the universe of existing buildings, they aren't divided in terms of how they're zoned or anything. The requirement applies whenever a high hazard is found to exist or potentially exist in the building. So the zoning criteria don't affect the decision on backflow.
Also, it's almost like penalizing me before anything's happened, It was real quick, they came down and looked at it and they found nothing. And, in my imagination, I can't imagine any of this industrial stuff being applied down there. And I'm sure I'd hear about it right away if the tenant spot moved or, I just wouldn't do that. I mean, because the bottom line is I have to be responsible for it and not the people that violate it. And I wouldn't know what they're doing if that was the case.
Ted, could you clarify or have somebody clarify for me? Mr. Heggie mentioned that putting the backflow prevention in would trigger a new water line service. Is
Right.
that the case? Because I didn't understand it that way.
It's not clear to me that it would necessarily trigger installation of a new service line. Now, when they pull a plumbing permit, there may be some chance that the plumbing inspector would come and ask them to upgrade some other things. I don't know the answer to that, honestly, what they may or may not require. And by the same token, but we would not require a new service line. There is no requirement for a new service line because of backflow, but there could very well be requirements for other upgrades within the building. And we, they wouldn't be our requirements, but there could be. I just don't know. The other point I think I'd like to make is that it's not clear to me that the zoning that he has there precludes any of the things that we're worried about going in there. And we know that he doesn't have anything in there today. We understand that and agree. It's just the potential. And we certainly appreciate your willingness to be open with us and give us information. But we have 85,000 customers and we can't check on them all annually and rely on them to report back to us annually to determine whether or not we should implement the backflow program. The very fact that it's in a visible place and we've all driven by it many times, but never did it trigger someone to say, hey, they should have backflow in there. Hey, that's a multi-use facility. We have a very specific program that utilizes these surveys on change account. And when an account changes, we send a survey, they fill out the survey, we recognize that they need backflow. Because it's a multi-use and the water always stays in your name, if someone does move in and out, and I know that's not the plan, and I know you don't expect that to happen in the near term, that's part of why we've given a year. We'll never be triggered to send the survey and we'll never know unless we set up some sort of a reporting relationship, which is not what we would recommend. I certainly understand there's potential cost associated with plumbing upgrades. There's no risk right now that we're aware of. The future risk may be minimal. I don't think we would even argue that. But we have a responsibility to protect the public water supply. And when we become aware of one of these places, to Sue's point, we don't really have the option to just say, well, we won't make them protected. So I'm still in the same place that I was before, recommending that we uphold the staff decision to move forward with backflow, but allowing a year to do that.
Let's get a motion on the table and then we can have a discussion.
Also, if I do rent to somebody, you're not notified, I mean, Joe Blow's chemistry company could move in there and you still wouldn't know unless I told you, you know.
But
Or unless somebody drove by, and that doesn't really protect it as much as I'm being responsible for it and knowing that, you know, that that's not gonna happen. So you really can't police it by any other way than somebody to deny them or
But if we
inform
have a
them.
device installed, then the public water supply is protected, and if a chemical company moved in, that would be okay, because the system would be protected. That's exactly the point we're trying to make here, is that we want a device there so that we don't have to worry, and you don't have to worry about who moves in there from a water quality perspective.
Okay, it's almost like, getting fined before you do a speeding ticket, they're gonna write you a ticket because you gotta cover the big motor, you might possibly speed, we should give you a ticket if that condition arises, I think, rather than, because it says right in here, it says, service to all newly constructed or remodeled commercial buildings. For these purposes, these rules and regulations to upgrade existing service line is deemed a new service. So they very much will go in there, and it could cost tens of thousands of dollars.
But you're misinterpreting that statement in the rules. That means that we will interpret your service as a new installation if you upgrade. If you remodel, you have to follow the same rules that new facilities have to follow. That doesn't mean you have to install a new water service. There is no requirement on our part that you install a new water service because you had backflow.
Okay, and also, when I understand it's the same backflow devices they use at 3,000 grand and Meredith Printing. I mean, it just seems like overkill. It couldn't be something in between.
Well, I think it'll be a much smaller device.
Okay. All right, so that, yeah, well, that's, if you think that, that's the best way to monitor it, this is nothing I can,
We don't really have a choice. I mean, this is something that we have to do. I mean, this is not a rule that Des Moines Water Works came up with, and we all really kind of came up to speed and learned about this within the last year. But this is our responsibility to protect the water, and it's not a choice that we have. We can't say, you know what, you are a nice guy, Mr. Hagan, we believe you, and we know that you'll tell us, and by the way, when we drive by, we'll swing in there and see what tenants. We can't arbitrarily apply conditions like that. We
So-
have to do it
I
equally
appreciate
to everyone.
So-
We don't, can we get a motion on the table and then we will discuss it? Been moved and seconded that we deny the appeal. I assume that's what, is that
Yes, correct.
deny
The
the
motion
appeal
as stated in
as
the.
stated and uphold the staff determination to require the installation of a backflow. So now we can discuss, and if you'll stay here so we can ask you some more questions during the discussion. I mean, I do want to tell you that, and I didn't think about this before, but several years ago I went and had a hairdresser, and she was in the back of an antique shop down near
Cherry Street?
architectural, yes, have you been there? And I thought it was an odd situation, but I didn't, and we should go check that. But she just set up a chair and a sink, did you?
I know her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that, if you have the property, it is something, and what Sue said is, I don't think you're gonna do that, but we have to, one of the things that we have to do is apply rules across the board equally to everyone. I understand what you're saying, I think any of us would say, we certainly don't want to impose unnecessary costs on you. We don't want to do anything to you that will make it difficult for your property, but we have a responsibility for public health, and we have a responsibility to administer these things in an even way. And that doesn't extend to checking up on certain people and seeing what's going on. It has to do with following through on these requirements. We had a lot of discussion about this a couple months ago and encourage people, if you think that these backflow requirements are not right, then you need to talk to your state legislator and those rules, because that's where the change needs to take place. Because by the time it gets to us, we have the rules that we are required to administer, and we can't be changing them. So I don't know how else
So
to say it.
in the last year, I haven't been able to rent it because I was working on the roof. If there were no tenants in there, I wouldn't be obligated.
Technically, if it's a multi-use facility,
And the water's
I'm
connected.
just guilty, I mean, I'm just kind of guilty on all counts, you know, and so we'll put that in case I do. It is just hard to swallow, but if that's the case.
Is there other discussion?
Other than to say, it's not a matter of being guilty, this is, to change your analogy a little bit, we're not issuing a speeding ticket in advance of a infraction of the law. It's more like how automobiles are mandated and we as consumers must pay for seatbelts and other things that protect public safety. That your car has to have stoplights and that sort of thing. Those are expenses we have to pay when we buy an automobile that protects the public safety. The backflow is the same type of a mechanism that is put in places of commercial businesses and other properties in order to protect as Ted said, the public supply of water. So believe me, as a guy who had 2 plumbers in my basement all day today, in a 113-year-old basement replacing plumbing, I feel the pain of paying for plumbing and that one thing can lead to another. And so I do not minimize why you're here, and I also appreciate, Mr. Hagee, the way that you have come to us and approached this. I'm gonna vote to deny your appeal, but please understand that I agree with Sue and my colleagues that this is something that we're mandated to do, and we're mandated to do it as to protect the public health, and that's why I have to vote on this that way.
I appreciate that, and it's kind of like your seatbelt analogy. They're on a car, you don't pull somebody over and say, well, we got a new law, let's put in seatbelts. And 2 years later, well, we got a new law, let's put in airbags. You know, I bought the car and, you know, bought the building and now
Sure.
being chased down. And it, you know, should be up to standard. I'm an electrician, I know you don't. If you bought a house that doesn't need GFIs in the basement, where they don't come in and make you put GFIs for safety reasons.
Right.
And I don't know how this is any different. 'Cause
And we can talk on this all day. The
Yeah.
only difference is that if there was a business operating, and there wasn't a backflow preventer on there, it puts multiple people at risk. It puts our entire water supply at risk. And so it's a more serious device and more important device than a seatbelt that might affect the driver or the passengers in that car. It actually, you know, could have impacted your neighbors in even a farther swath than that. So anyway, we're not here to quibble on that. I appreciate you coming and I understand your concern.
Okay. Well, thank you.
I had a quick note on the zoning aspect. It seems that even if the zoning did preclude it from one of these hazardous uses, Waterworks isn't gonna get notified if the city changes the zoning or variance is issued. So it seems like we shouldn't think about it in the context of whether or not the zoning allows one of these
That's an
hazardous
excellent
uses.
That's excellent.
we still need to.
Yep, yes, we do. So it's been moved and seconded that we deny the appeal and uphold the staff determination to require installation of a backflow device for containment at 822 35th Street. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Amy. All right. The next item is request authorization to solicit bids for 2020 Des Moines water main replacement, contract one, and establish a date of public hearing as the date of March 2020 board meeting.
Yes, this is a very straightforward item. We actually, in April, I believe, yes, April of 2019, we had a water main break under the railroad tracks across Walnut Street in the 2000, East Walnut Street in the 2000 block. And we were unable to repair that break because it was directly under an active rail line. So we literally installed valves on either side of the railroad right-of-way and isolated that piece of main, which created some very long dead ends and have negatively impacted our system. And so we are bringing to you today a small contract to replace that water line under the railroad tracks and reconnect those two long dead ends that were created. That's the purpose of this small project, and we would ask your permission to solicit bids.
I have a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion, questions for Ted?
You said this says this is enhances service to the UP. How does it enhance service to the UP?
Right now, they're being served off of a very long dead end line.
What UP facility?
I don't know.
Okay.
I can't answer that question.
All right,
But
that's
that
fine.
was the impression.
Okay.
There's other businesses that are similarly negatively impacted, exactly where UPRR is down there. I'm gonna have to say, I don't know either, but there are
It's-
other businesses that are
Sure.
nearby that are affected by these dead ends.
Okay.
And I did look at the site this morning, and the dead end is several blocks on the east side of the railroad tracks. Which one of those is UP, I don't know.
Okay.
From my background, how is a business or any user negatively affected by a long dead end?
You know, there are a couple of things. One, they can experience reduced pressure because the system isn't looped. And if there isn't adequate usage on that dead end, they can actually experience some water quality degradation over time. We're hoping that over a few months' time, that won't become an issue. But those are the two main issues. Fire protection can be somewhat limited by being served off of a long dead end instead of a looped system also. That's probably the bigger issue. Thankfully, we haven't had any need for fire usage down there since this happened, so we haven't had any specific issues.
Any other questions? Hearing none, it's been moved and seconded that we authorize staff to solicit bids for the 2020 Des Moines water main replacement. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Oh dear.
You love this.
I do, I get quite confused.
We love watching.
Yeah, I know.
I got good at it after 4 years.
The next item is 2020 pre-sedimentation basin number 2 rechaining.
And this is a public hearing, but before we open the public hearing, I want to share just a couple of nuances with this particular project. This is actually a project that was budgeted to be completed a year ago, but we ended up needing those funds for some other projects. That's not unusual for us to move funds around a little bit from time to time, and this was one that we thought we could put off for a year. So we did that. And then this year, in December, the project had been delayed essentially a year, but in December, we came to the board and requested permission to bid the project the first part of this year. This basin rechaining is something we do regularly. We have 6 basins. Every 6 or 8 years, we go in and kind of systematically, one each year, replace the mechanical parts inside the basin. They wear out and they have to be replaced. So we requested permission to bid. We brought to you an engineer's estimate that was comparable to many of the ones we've completed historically. And then over the last month, a couple of months, as we got into the design of this particular project, we realized that there was significantly more damage in this basin than we had anticipated. Thankfully, we recognized that before we sent it out to bid, but the amount of work basically doubled. The work needed to be done, so we went ahead and issued the plans and specifications and received bids. But what I would like to do is offer a revised estimate based on the expanded scope, so that when we approve the plans and specifications and estimated costs, we'll be approving something that's more applicable to the project that we ended up doing. So Michael and his folks estimated the cost of the revised project would be $220,000, so essentially double what the original project had been estimated at. We did then take those plans and specifications out to bid, and 5 contractors looked at the plans. 2 of them came to the pre-bid meeting and saw the project. Only one of them submitted a bid, unfortunately, which is never our preference to have only one bid. But again, Michael and his folks have taken a look. The price, we had unit prices on this contract, so we could compare the work that we originally intended to do and see that the price for that was very comparable to the original estimate. We could compare the additional work that we needed to do to the unit prices that they bid, and we're very comfortable that the prices that we received are fair and equitable. The project desperately needs to be done, and so we're still interested in awarding this contract, but I wanted to share all of that with you before we open the public hearing and approve the estimate. That there was a change between the time that it was originally approved for solicitation of bids and the time that it went out on the street.
So Dan, tell me what's the suggested method here? We're gonna approve a new estimate? Is that what you're suggesting?
Revised estimate.
A revised estimate?
Yes.
And when do we do that in this process?
Well, I think that we now go and open the public hearing.
And then we'll do it after that?
And do it based on the revised.
Okay, I just wanna make sure I knew what we were doing.
And stop me if I'm.
Absolutely correct.
I hate when he pulls out the blue sheet. Okay, I'll open the public hearing for comments from the public concerning the project's form of contract, plans, and specification. And that would be the revised.
The revised
Revised
estimate, that's right.
And estimated cost.
Right, estimated costs. And then I will share that we have received no comments from the public, written or verbal, on this project.
And hearing that, we will close the public hearing. The board finds the project as revised,
As revised.
reflects appropriate coordination of existing infrastructure, and there are no suitable facilities available for rent or sharing in lieu of the project. There's no motion necessary for this finding.
Correct.
I'd like a motion to approve the project's form of contract, plans and specification, and the revised estimated cost.
So,
Second.
Third.
I think I've already provided analysis of the single bid that we received, and we are comfortable with
Do we
that.
need to take a vote here?
I'm sorry.
It's been moved and seconded, that we approve the project's form of contract, plans and specifications and revised estimated costs. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ted approves the analysis of the bids and makes a recommendation.
Now I hate the blue sheet too.
Yeah.
I think we've done that unless there are questions on the analysis of bids.
So I would like a motion to approve the general manager's recommendation awarding the contract to Waldinger
Yes?
Corporation in the amount of $239,560 and authorize the chair and the CEO and general manager to execute the contract.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Good job. Yay. I'm gonna take that back.
Yep. Save that for the next time.
Great. Right. With that, we're through action items and information items. Board committee reports, planning committee.
Yeah. So we met earlier this month and learned about the proposed lead and copper rule revision, really focusing on the lead part of that rule revision. My understanding that if I'm reading my notes correctly, that there's a draft that is due to be out by the end of the year, and really this is looking at putting responsibility of replacing all of our lead copper lines, replacing all of our lead lines throughout the system, including those that lead up to homeowners.
There are, yes, indeed, there are a number of requirements, and you're exactly right, that one of the things we have to consider is a plan for replacing
Yes.
all the lead service lines. Doesn't necessarily mean that they will all have to be replaced, but we have to have a plan. We have to develop a plan.
Which sounds like it's going to be very costly.
Okay, we have to pay for it.
So we're doing this in anticipation of some rules that will be coming out. We're making comment on the rules for, to take into consideration ways that we could do it, that we would mitigate some of the cost or make it more compatible with the way we do business. I don't know, Jenny, you want to briefly talk about that?
Yep, so we did provide comments. They were due February 12th, I believe. So the Waterworks submitted comments on how it would affect us, specifically because we do not own the service lines. So some communities actually own the water service up to the house or up halfway to the stop box. We own none of it. And so for us to have to force a homeowner to replace it becomes interesting. Or if we have to absorb the cost somehow, even though it's not ours, it's a problem. And so we submitted comments on those types of things to the EPA.
So I think the intent was to get a jump on this, even though we don't know what the final rules are, and to understand.
And we do know that we're gonna have to update our lead service line inventory and create public information pieces. And we know that there are a few things we have to do, and so we're gonna do those. And then we anticipate that we're gonna have to develop this lead service line replacement program that Andrew was referring to. And so we're working on that, trying to get ahead of it.
Ted, you might want to mention that there's no observable hazard at this point from existing lead service lines, and you might want to explain why that is to people who just tune in to this on the cable.
Sure. We do have a number of lead service lines remaining in Des Moines, around 12,000, we think. We're working on updating that number, but we do extensive testing every year. We are able to confirm that we are not seeing a lead in drinking water issue in the Des Moines system. And the reason that is, we very carefully control the water chemistry when the water leaves the treatment plants. We ensure that the water is just on the depositing side of the corrosive depositing scale, so that it tends to just deposit a thin coating. And Jenny, I believe, brought some samples the last time that we could look at it and actually showed that coating that forms on the inside of the pipe is very protective. So we don't have a lead problem. That's part of what we're hopeful that we can replace our lead service lines in a very stepwise fashion over time, because we don't have a problem currently. No real issue.
There's no action on this at this time, it's just informational, just so people understand what's happening. Finance and Audit Committee?
Sure. I was a committee of one this month, but it was a presentation that we're going to hear more about, and I won't, if Amy wants to talk about it a little bit today, maybe that would be appropriate, but we talked about the long road to the new customer relations software and implementation, and it is exciting. I mean, it's something we've talked about for many years, to upgrade our system, and the real, the folks who benefit from this the most, and rightfully so, are our ratepayers, and their ability, and our ability to service them, I think is the best way to say that. But this touches everything from the, our folks who are out in the field, for the way, how they do their business. I mean, literally today, they get paper in the morning, and they arrange the paper and go out and do their schedule based on that. This will computerize that, and so that they can go out with a tablet and it routes them. It's much more efficient. But then taking that to the customer level, it's going to be so much better for the customer whenever there's an issue they can call in, that our folks can immediately look at their account, check their service. I mean, takes us. It's a little bit like when I bought my wife a new car, and her car was rather old, and she said she was going from, this pre-computer era to a car that was, had all of the bells and whistles. That's kind of what we're doing. I mean, we're taking a huge leap here, right, Amy? I mean, I think it's really great. And once you guys take a look at the demonstration that I saw, when does that come to this board?
We hope to go live this summer.
So you'll probably come to us sometime before then again?
We sure can.
I think you should. I think you should all see it. It's a really interesting program, and like Amy mentioned, it goes live this summer. And some of the things I ask are questions that I know you guys would ask, and that is, what's the backup of this? I mean, if it fails, are we able to keep operating? And all of those safeguards are in place, and obviously we're worried about hacking and all of those things, and they seem to be on top of that. And then, of course, because it was the week of the caucuses, I had made some dry joke about, what do we do if the system fails, especially when we go live this summer. And I think, what Amy and her team, their approach to phasing this in and being prepared when we go live, I felt very comfortable after that. What have I forgotten, Amy?
I think you nailed it. You were a good committee of one.
But I mean, the thing that's amazing is the number of man hours and women hours that were spent here over the last, 3 years to bring this up is remarkable. And I'm a Des Moines Waterworks snob, but I think there are few organizations that can pull this off. So it makes me proud to be a Des Moines Waterworks person.
Real team effort.
Absolutely.
I think it's a good suggestion, maybe in June, before we go live, we could add a board meeting, make sure everybody understands that we're gonna be cutting over.
Yeah.
It's cool. I mean, it's worth seeing.
Customer relations committee.
There was
I
no, there was no
remember we
meeting,
canceled the meeting,
but there have been a number of things happening.
yeah, Joel, and this for your information, the customer relations committee really is the place that we place the regionalization efforts, so.
And a couple of quick updates I can provide in the absence of the committee meeting. We did have a very good conversation in Waukee. Amy and I visited Waukee, and we did a WebEx with Jason, and he walked them through a number of questions that they had on Friday. And then today, Urbandale and West Des Moines and their financial consultant were here with Amy and I again, and we did another online engagement with Jason, and really did a nice job. I thought they got a lot of their questions answered, very positive meeting, very good discussion. I think everybody's really starting to grasp what it is that Jason has done in this model to try to tease out what the costs of regionalization are going to look like. So those are good meetings, and then this Thursday, 2 days from today, we have our first committee meeting that is a result of the most recent regional meeting, where a number of folks are going to get together and talk about some outstanding questions that various people have. Something we'll probably talk a little bit more about in the next day or so. But more communication and information and understanding people's concerns before we start trying to hammer out answers to some of their questions.
Is that the meeting's tomorrow?
It's Thursday.
Thursday, is that meeting a public notice meeting?
It is.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure that it was on there.
It is.
Oh, and the one other piece too, and I know it's been a long time since our last board meeting, but I thought the input that this board gave at our last board meeting. Then keep in mind, we brought the entire group of the regional customers together 2 days later. And it was really, I thought, the suggestions to the PowerPoint that really helped us keep it on track. And there were some, I think, pretty strong messages delivered to our suburban customers that we do want this to happen as a board, and that the ball's in your court. And I think they walked away with a solid understanding of that. And then from that time, information started coming our way. By 10 o'clock that night, we had an email from West Des Moines, from Jimmy Smith, and so I think it really did lay the groundwork for this meeting that we'll have then on Thursday.
Do we know what next steps are after, or when we will come back together after this Thursday meeting?
You know, we have a customer relations committee meeting scheduled the first Tuesday of March, and we are
Next
planning.
week.
Yeah.
Okay.
We are planning to have that meeting.
Okay.
And so, it's right around the corner. Hardly seems like there's time for anything to happen between now and then,
It's just
but
really hard to believe that it's March
I
next
know.
week with this.
agreed.
Yeah.
But we're gonna meet and have that discussion, and what I'd really like to do, and I've had some conversation with some of the suburban folks about what these committee meetings are gonna look like and what we're gonna try to accomplish. And what I've shared with them, and you can certainly redirect me if that's appropriate, but what I've shared with them is we're not planning to go into this meeting on Thursday and come out with decisions. We're planning to go in and try to understand everyone's perspectives on things like governance or rate of return, or what is the universe of available options there, and where do people stand today, and how much can we narrow that down so that then we can bring that information to this board or the committee and talk through those things. And then ultimately, I imagine we will get to the point where we'll be doing some negotiation, but those will be meetings specifically scheduled for that purpose. Does that seem reasonable? Is that what everyone expected coming out of our last regional discussion from these committee meetings?
Ted, I do think it would be helpful for the board to have an ongoing list of the designees from each of those suburban communities. And I know that that's kind of been slow to come, but as that list is compiled, or even as of today, so that we know, who will be representing Johnston, who will be representing Urbandale.
Sure, Laura's the keeper of the list. I'm sure she'd be happy to share that with all of us. And the other thing, Laura, we can share is the list of all the questions. We got questions from many of the entities, and we've tried to kind of compile them into topic subject areas. And then we put an agenda together, frankly, starting with some of the easier to answer questions, some of the things that are just misconceptions, and then moving into things like board composition. I don't remember the exact order of the agenda, but trying to get through some of the things that we feel like people are going to want to know before we get to those weighty issues like asset transfer and how that will work specifically, and depreciation and how we're going to align those. So there's been some thought put into it. We can share that all with you, and you can provide feedback on it if you have other thoughts or concerns or questions. And then we can report out on the first meeting next Tuesday and get everybody's perspective. Some of those of you, it's a public meeting, so a noticed meeting, all are welcome.
I think the intent is that we expressed when we had the meeting of all of our customers in that big group a few weeks ago, is that we want to bring this thing to some kind of closure. Are we going ahead? Who are we going ahead with by June mid-year? They expressed to us, West Des Moines expressed to us that they would be getting their study back and have the information that they needed, that we don't want these meetings to be a starting over, let's start over with all of this stuff and just continuous churn where we're getting nowhere. So we want to know, for our purposes, are you in and putting this together? Are you not in? And if we don't get critical mass or who we need to be in, then we'll probably just call an end to these efforts and make the decisions we need to make.
This Thursday is the meeting that you're representing us at, Ted, correct?
I am, but I believe that Diana's gonna be there as well, and it's a public meeting, so.
Yeah, I don't know.
What's the time and location of that?
2 to 4 here, right?
In this
Yeah.
room.
In this room.
Yeah.
This reminds me that I need to reach out to West Des Moines and ask again, when do you think you'll be able to tell us? We have not yet gotten that date certain.
You know, and I just want to say that these individual meetings, I think have really proven to be helpful. We shared some of the comments that Mayor Gear and Tom Haddon shared with us. And I still go back to the meeting that we had with Waukee. I'm really impressed with their leadership. There's a strong financial understanding there, and they certainly came to the table wanting to better understand what it would be if they went with the western suburb, that there were kind of questions floating around, but also truly an idea of the numbers and the cost that we had presented as of October, and then the additional detail that Jason had given. And so I thought their questions were great, and it certainly did not appear like they had made any kind of a decision. So I just want to make sure everyone knows that it was far more positive than what I think maybe we had been led to believe by some.
Any other questions? Where we are on that? Bill Stowe Memorial
Yeah,
Committee?
Andrew and I met with the other committee members yesterday, and both Amy and Liam Stowe were able were part of the committee, and were both able to be there. Liam was back from California for a wedding. And it was great because we had Country Landscapes present some ideas, and I'll pass these down to you in a minute. As a reminder, and maybe as new information for Joel, when we started talking about doing something in Bill Stowe's memory, we tossed around a lot of ideas, and where we began to focus was kind of using the Citizens Water Academy as the building block for that, right? I mean, the Citizens Water Academy is something that Bill Stowe brought to Des Moines Water Works. About 25 people every fall go through this very comprehensive learning program about water and the environment. It's a tremendous thing, and it's part of Bill's legacy. And so we thought, well, beyond just renaming the academy, the Citizens Water Academy, the William G. Stowe Academy, give some thought about what else can we do along that vein. And so that's kind of part one of this. And the second part would be to build what we started to call an outdoor classroom. And we asked Country Landscapes to put together some ideas, and
Is this one?
they're all different. It's all the same.
It's different
Kind of
views of the same idea.
Very, yeah. And so think of where the old barn still stands, Ted. I noticed it wasn't knocked down yet, Ted.
It is tomorrow.
Tomorrow, I may have to come out and celebrate. But where the old barn is standing as of this moment is kind of where this is being designed. Now, we may have to alter it a little bit based on flood, but that's kind of our starting point. And so this room, if you will, would be something that is on that site. Those boards that you see, they swivel. And what that would be designed is unclear, but think of them maybe as stone, okay? And maybe one side is blank and the other side might carry, an educational board to talk about the gallery system or to talk about other type of water, how water is produced here. One of the great ideas we had is one of those boards might have all of the names of the graduates of the Water Academy that could be updated every year. Some of those boards could be donor names. I think the committee agrees that those boards would be something that we would update or have the ability to update. So, and we're working with the Science Center of Iowa to come up with that educational curriculum. Those two could be updated or changed depending on what the Science Center exhibits were happening. And think of this space too as, yes, a classroom, but also could have other uses. This could be a great place for weddings and other types of things. And so as we get back into the, and get really down to the numbers of how much this costs, that's one of the things we have in the back of our heads, does this work? From a size perspective, that circle is about a 48-foot diameter, so about twice the size of this room. So a pretty big space. What we have to figure out is, does that make sense? The thumbnail that we've been using is 2 busloads of kids, which could be about 90 kids in the space. Would that hold them? I don't have the answer to that, but that's kind of what we're using. There's gonna be a phone call with some event planners and others to kind of think about what we would need to know from electrical and that kind of thing, and obviously we would want water. You probably noticed those circles that would be the entry are reminiscent of the gallery system pipes, which was where our starting point was. And it's not really shown great in these black and white designs, but in the color designs that were part of their PowerPoint. Imagine that you walk through the tunnel, past the sculpture, past the amphitheater and the playground. That first circle, which would be 8 feet in diameter that you would walk through, would look right straight through to the other one, which is bigger. It's 12 feet. So it actually draws your eye to those ponds that are part of the gallery system. And I think all of us were very excited about this design. Amy and Liam think it's great. As I say, what the next step now is Country Landscapes is going to go put some numbers to this. It would be far cheaper for us to build it without a roof, and it kind of looks cool without a roof. I kind of like that design. Yeah, it's kind of cool. If we put the roof on it, it has a lot of expense from the standpoint that all of the footings have to be so much bigger, because not only from the weight of the roof, but because it's an open structure, the wind that would blow through there and the way it would lift and that sort of thing. So it does add to the cost. And maybe it's worth doing, and maybe it's not, but stay tuned, we'll continue to discuss that. We have we have a member of the Science Center of Iowa that's a part of the committee now, and we're talking to the Botanical Garden as well, because we want partners to develop that curriculum and also the users of this. And we'll work with the public schools as well. We're also reaching out to Grinnell University because of Bill's history with them, and seeing if they would be interested in being a partner in what we are envisioning as a speaker series, probably an annual speaker on water and environment. Again, because we don't have the capacity to do that here in-house. So it'd be nice to have a partner that would do the administrative part and be in that business of recruiting speakers, but and be our partner with that. Grinnell isn't committed yet. I'm committed for them, but I mean, we'll reach out to others if they don't do it. But just to give you the idea of where we're looking. And so the plan as it is today is to get the numbers back from Country Landscape, which helps us from a fundraising standpoint, idea, of what we're gonna raise. Then on or about April 23rd, which is a Thursday, late afternoon, we would like to have some sort of an announcement event. It's kind of an important date in a lot of ways. That's the date of, or the week of Earth Week, or Earth Day. And also it'll be about a year in the time since Bill passed. But it would be, that Thursday night would be the night before the Waterworks Park Foundation hides their eggs in the park, their glass eggs in the park, and so there'd be some things of that. We would invite alumni of the Academy and a bunch of other people to be part of that event. I had a conversation with Art Cullen yesterday, and Art Cullen has informally agreed to be kind of a speaker at that event, which would also be poetic. So put that in pencil on your calendar, April 23rd in the late afternoon, and keep your fingers crossed that we can get a lot of work done between now and then to make that happen. The idea would be that would kind of be the announcement of what we're doing, not necessarily a groundbreaking per se, but a launch of our idea and concept and fundraising. So.
And Graham, would that be somewhat of a separate fund under the community foundation?
Oh, that's a great question. Yes, yes. The Park Foundation, I think most of the checks would be written to the Park Foundation, but all that money would be housed at the Community Foundation. And it's two-part, right? Because the second part, which is this outdoor classroom or learning center, whatever we decide to call it, would work much like all of the other improvements have at the park. obviously it's owned and managed by Des Moines Waterworks, we would let those contracts and that sort of thing. But the community foundation piece is very important because that fund, we hope to raise money that's in that fund to fund ongoing efforts. Yet to be decided, right? The annual speaker, hopefully there's some, we expand the academy to include school-aged children or senior citizens or what have you, or things we haven't thought of yet as an ongoing event. And that would also have what?
Just listening to you, this keeps getting bigger.
But and that's right. I mean, it's all unknown, right? I mean, we don't want to limit ourselves, and we may not be able to pull it all off. But the idea would be that if there are funds in it, you know, if we're successful, and let's say we raise $1 million for this, right? And I think I'm overly optimistic saying that the pavilion's $250,000, but we're just throwing numbers around, right? So $250,000 for that, and then we have a fund that's in there. That extra fund would then have to have some sort of a committee that managed it, which obviously Amy and Liam would be a part of, and we'd have to write the bylaws for that and decision for that. So those are all, like Andrea says, it's a lot, you know, I'm talking real big, but I want to think big because maybe we can get there. And maybe we don't get to our $1 million this year. Maybe we can pay for this and continue to grow it through annual events. But I think we're trying to build something that is long-term and it's more than just a sculpture of the park. It's something that, you know, I think that Bill would appreciate. That's an ongoing, an ongoing outreach and educational thing. Laura, Andrea, what have I forgotten or totally overstated?
I think you captured everything from our meeting, and I think you are right in that we're trying to really create a sustainable thing that continues on beyond the completion of construction.
Right. And as I say, obviously I get excited about this, and I got really excited yesterday when I saw these designs, but I mean, the real point is that we don't have all the answers yet. And we want to involve the alumni of the academy and others to brainstorm about what that education looks like. Amy is very insistent, and rightfully so, that we involve the Science Center and other educational entities to create this and keep it going into the future. And so, so we're thinking big, and we're trying to figure out how to do that. And maybe $1 million is an aggressive number, maybe it's not. That's where we are today.
We've come a long ways in a short period of time. So, yeah, thanks. The botanical?
Not much to report. Well, there's not much to report there. As I said, I think at our last meeting, and Ted and I have talked about, we're going to have, this spring, we want to have some meetings with the Botanical Garden about the future of our relationship. And I think the time is coming to do that. Chris Hensley is now on the board of the Botanical Garden, and she had a couple of pointed comments at our last meeting when it came to fundraising and specifically the city's commitment to do things and how no one should do anything unless the Des Moines Waterworks is committed to continuing their commitment for the next 10 years. And I don't quite understand the linkage to Des Moines Waterworks and other people doing things. But I don't always understand what Chris Hensley has to say. But it did remind me, Ted, that we probably should start having those meetings with the staff over there.
You want us to set something up?
Give Joel a little more background on this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so back a number of years ago, the city got to the point where it was unable to manage the Botanical Garden and asked Des Moines Waterworks to step in and manage it. Des Moines Waterworks managed Botanical Garden for how many years?
10.
A decade, let's say. And then kind of a few years ago, a number of philanthropic, really well-meaning and good people in Des Moines stepped forward with a plan for the future of the Botanical Garden and raised a whole bunch of money. And that's why you see the Botanical Garden looks the way it does today. It's transformed. Yeah. And what Des Moines Waterworks did at that time was to create way forward, and the town garden's way forward was for us to scale back. You know, our employees came back to Warren Water Works. We provide in-kind services in the amount of how much a year?
$200,000.
$200,000 a year, so we do some maintenance over there and send our people over to do some things. We also,
just pay a lot of bills.
We pay a lot of bills.
Just write checks.
Right.
Is the primary thing we do, plus free water.
and we give them water. Now, Bill and I worked real hard on that water. I think what we do, we averaged their use over a period of time and gave them a 10-year kind of bucket of water, if you will. And if they began to use over that, then they would begin to pay. Long story short, we're about year 6 or 7 of that agreement right now, and it's gonna come to an end. And we as an organization are gonna have to make some decisions about what, we're in year 8. Now that makes more sense, yeah, that we would be in year 8. We have to make some decisions, I think really this year, about what our commitment's gonna be going forward. You know, are we gonna continue to provide free water at any level? Are we gonna do anything? I sit on the Des Moines, or the town garden board as our representative over there, which is part of our agreement. So anyway, my advice, Ted and everybody else, is that we have those meetings and probably sometime this year, or sooner, or as opposed to later, make some decisions about what we want to do and what's appropriate for our ratepayers. And I don't, you guys need to think about it too. I don't have a strong opinion about what that agreement should look like for the next 10 years or ongoing. But I think we're going to have to give some thought to that, and there'll be some political pressure on us to do more. So yes, so my first answer to you was not much. I take it live. Let's talk about that also.
Yeah, I think
Thank you
that's
for the background.
I think that's a good,
We should talk first.
I'm sorry, that's not.
the Waterworks Park Foundation.
Yeah, I can speak to that, and then I'll also let Mike if he's got anything to add. The Park Foundation Board had their retreat, strategic planning, earlier this month to kind of identify and hone in on what their goals are. Above and beyond, one of those goals were to complete what they have started and not to incur any more expenses beyond that. So pay what they owe, fundraise what they need, and to finish this phase 1. Beyond that, it's trying to find that sweet spot for how they are sustainable into the future with concerts and events, and how they use that space moving forward to also build a community around the park and get people in to the park to use it. A couple things that I want to point out, as Graham mentioned, there is anticipation that they will be able to host the egg hunt again, which would be Saturday, April 25th. And then now that just about all the elements of the phase 1 are coming to a close, they are planning for a dedication date in June. Right now they're looking at early June, but as we get closer, that date will become more firm, and I can share that with you. Know if you want to share more of the development and construction updates.
Yeah, quotes on the barn, really not a Park Foundation effort, but certainly related to this park space. Getting quotes tomorrow for its demolition. One small piece of construction happened over the winter. You may or may not have noticed, but the light poles around the Great Lawn are in. Take a drive by when it's dark. I think you'll hopefully think it looks pretty nice. I don't know that we've done the deepest inspection on that, but from afar, it looks nice. I will echo the theme of the strategic session of the 2020 focus is about finishing the phase 1 elements and getting the final monies raised to finish this off correctly. So we appreciate that focus.
Andrea, I had a question for you. There was one line in the report that kind of jumped out at me. Bolton asked if there were any necessary actions that needed to be taken on the bats.
Oh, sure.
Can you fill us in on what that means?
I was wondering about that.
So
You're gonna get the name Batwoman, you realize that, right?
which is it's unfortunate because it's not my area.
It is now, sister.
But the barn has
Yeah.
lots of bats, lots
Okay.
and lots and lots of bats in there. And I, coming from a natural resource background, wanted to make sure that once that barn came down, the bats had somewhere to go.
Okay.
And there's been a discussion about putting up bat houses and providing some additional habitat for them with their barn being gone. In my line of work, there is this ridiculous funding that I've been told is available for it, but it's all predicated on the bat species and a bat inventory and bats, more information about bats. But we've been working with the Stowe Memorial Committee, and working with Mike and Laura, and to kind of dig deeper about what we can do to provide or have a conversation about providing some sort of alternative for when the bats return in the spring.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Diane, for the Park Foundation, Dave Carlson had served as our other representative on that board. What are we gonna do to fill that space?
I think, did we go ahead and put Mike on that? How did we do that?
We have not done anything official, and usually we've had members of this board serve as our representatives, but that's not to say we can't do something different, but there hasn't been anything officially.
Right, and I don't know, Joel will have discussions with you about where your interests lie. We'll make sure that we're well represented in those.
Right.
Because we also have an open seat on the planning committee, and
I'm putting one all over the place.
all the time.
I came to your committee meeting.
Yes, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, I want to help fill some of these vacancies, probably after my orientation next month would be a good time to at least get through that before starting to figure out where I fit in best and have some conversations with each of you about where, if other people want to shuffle around
I
or
mean, we
where
have a
I'm
lot of
most needed.
people to self-select this, and that seems to have worked out. That's my preference on where we begin. People's interest. So yeah, we'll slot you in and we'll make sure.
I'm sure Joel wouldn't be disappointed if we push it off till May when he graduates too.
The bar exam is in late July, so maybe after that.
Ted, did you want to talk about
The
the
concert.
concert schedule?
Absolutely. If you look at the back of the Park Foundation update, you'll see just a one-page calendar, very simple calendar. And what we have decided, or what we're proposing to do is each month bring to the board this calendar that will show the types of events and when they are scheduled. It's very simple. Try to give you a little bit of an idea what the genre of the band is if you're like me and you don't necessarily know what a JR is. But then, some other things, the Park Foundation is coordinating with the Ironman triathlon folks. They've got a couple of their own events, and so we've color-coded those. Just to kind of keep help you keep an eye on what's being planned. This is very much in flux, it changes all the time. They have potential acts, and then they fall through and they get others. What we're proposing to put on this calendar is things that have been confirmed. As recently as yesterday, Jamie Johnson and Whiskey Myers have been confirmed for July 18th, another concert on the 18th of July, which will be added. And that brings up another point, which is we can bring this on a monthly basis, and you can see something like this, and we'll leave all the events on there, and it will continue to fill out, and it'll give us kind of an annual look. Or Michelle Watson has offered that she would be happy to send out an update each time we add something to it, if you're that interested.
I don't want that.
I said that I would be happy with the monthly update.
Right.
Very good.
I mean, unless there was some
urgency to send it out. I mean, if there was,
Themselves.
I don't know what that would be.
Yeah, I don't think so, but that option is available,
My,
should you choose. Does this look okay? Is this
Yep.
the right kind of
Yeah, sounds
information?
helpful.
Michelle did a great job of making something simple and you can look at it very quickly.
Yep.
So you can look forward to that at the end of the Park Foundations. We'll just slide it in behind their update each month and you can see exactly what's scheduled. Perfect.
Staff update, Laura?
I'll just reiterate some highlights that was provided in your memo in the board packet. Last Friday was the first funnel deadline, which may not mean anything to anyone, but it is a date where most bills are required to move through the committee to stay alive. So a lot of activity was happening for about 4.5 days of introducing bills and getting them on the calendar for committee, subcommittee, and committee. If that did not happen, then they are considered dead. So there was a lot of activity the last couple weeks to do that. Two areas that I do want to highlight that did survive the funnel. One being several bill versions on hands-free electronic device use, so texting and holding up your phone while driving. Those versions, different versions have made its way through the process. So now it goes to the other chamber and then it's up to for floor debates in those respective chambers as well. We have introduced language as a potential amendment to exempt utility vehicles. Like you heard Graham talk about, we have laptops and tablets inside our vehicles right now, and going in the future with the upgrade of our customer information system, we'll have more of those laptops and tablets in our utility vehicles. And we need to make sure that we can utilize those in the right of way on traveled portions of the street. Right now, it does not exempt us, so we want to make sure that we can continue our work if this bill goes into law.
Important to note there,
Yeah.
not while we're driving,
Correct.
just simply while we're in the right of
Yes.
way. Because we do a lot of our work in right of way and the bill says you can't do that.
And we're getting quite a bit of support from other utilities, Mid-American, other gas, electric, water utilities that would be supportive of this amendment because they need to do their jobs in the right of way as well. So we're not an outlier there. Another bucket of bills that I just want to highlight very briefly, and I don't know the intimate details, and I have relied on legal counsel heavily on this bucket of bills, is public improvement, clarifying language. Rick and John Landy at Dickinson have been instrumental in interpreting the language for me, making sure that it doesn't hurt us, and if there's a benefit to us, that we would register for it. So thank you to legal counsel for that interpretation of public improvement bills. That is not my area of expertise. Other than that, much time and attention will now be focused on the governor's Invest in Iowa tax package. So that is making its way. It'll start in the subcommittee in both chambers, and she's having town halls around the state just to get feedback. Just so you know, as the memo states, Des Moines Water Works is registered as monitoring as the bill makes their way through both respective chambers through the committee process. That's where we're at right now.
Any questions for Laura?
Laura, I attended the Adel Town Hall meeting. The vast majority of the questions were regarding water quality.
Yep.
And what we could do to monitor it and what we can do to consider, I mean, there were a lot of books there,
Yeah.
so.
It is a comprehensive tax package. It's a hefty bill and it's hard to understand, but obviously the bill does include the 3/8 cent funding for the implementation of the trust fund. So that's getting a lot of the attention, which is great. But we are still in the position that it's not quote unquote new money, since we may be shifting some money the way the bill is written right now, away from other essential services that the state needs. And then it would then just go into the nutrient reduction strategy, which has its own host of problems with monitoring, with accountability and transparency, but the same things we've been saying for about 10 years.
Thank you. Ted, do you have any additional comments?
Two quick things for me. Coronavirus continues to surge around the world. The CDC said today it's not a matter of if there will be an outbreak in the United States, but when and how bad it will be. So we continue to monitor that situation. Staff will be meeting tomorrow to take another look at our plan that is in place, but it hasn't been used for a number of years, and so we need to update it. Right now, we're just simply monitoring, but as if the virus moves into the state of Iowa and certainly into the Moines Waterworks staff, there are a lot of triggers there that will require us to do a lot of things that we've seen other cities, entities, businesses doing around the world. So we remain hopeful that that won't be a big impact, but we will try to be ready in case there is impact. The other thing is that spring water quality is here. The river is getting a little zesty, I think Kyle said.
Zesty.
Yeah.
Zesty.
What is the ammonia level in the raccoon today?
It was 0.66.
0.66, so that's really horrible. We like to see it be below 0.1. We're effectively off of the Raccoon River right now for all intents and purposes. We're relying on the Des Moines, which has a much lower ammonia concentration, but 0.66 would result in us feeding 5 times the normal amount of chlorine, something in that range, so we have to stay away from that. An annual thing, hopefully it'll clear up pretty quickly, at least before the ammonia makes it through the reservoir and shows up in the Des Moines River, so here we go again. And that's it.
Okay. Any questions about the last 2 items, the contract status spreadsheet or the lead certification from the workforce? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Okay. We're done.